Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, in light of Star Wars The Last Jedi, the film that single-handedly took one of the greatest franchises in cinematic history and reduced it to a smouldering heap of ashes, it could be very easy to be downtrodden and left with a very sour and pessimistic taste in your mouth about the current state of modern cinema. But I say, don't panic, cinema goers. Don't panic, movie lovers. There is still hope. There are still filmmakers out there who are doing the Lord's work, who are making excellent movies and are making films that are well worth your money, well worth taking the time to go and see, especially in a cinema. And one of those filmmakers which we can pin our hopes on is Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan has an absolutely awesome repertoire, a profoundly awesome filmography. Just have a listen and think about some of these titles. Dunkirk, Interstellar, Batman, not just one movie, but 3 films in the Batman trilogy, including The Dark Knight, which is easily one of the best movies in cinematic history, one of the best movies that's been made in the last 30 years. Inception, The Prestige, Insomnia, Memento. That's Christopher Nolan, right? Now think about that filmography there, that Christopher Nolan filmography. Can you name me one bad film in that list? You can't. Even what you might consider an average Christopher Nolan movie is still 99.9% better than what are touted as being the best movies that are supposedly being released today in the cinema, especially the big blockbuster budget, high budget summer specials, you know, the popcorn films, that the banner movies that we're all supposed to be going along to and just enthralled at and drooling with big goggling eyes as we can't believe what's unfolding on the screen in front of us. Those films, even the best of those types of movies, are still not as good as an average, and I say average as someone who doesn't really believe that so far he's made an average movie, an average Christopher Nolan film. There is something truly magical about a Christopher Nolan film. There's something different about it. There's just a beauty to the cinematography, the way it's shot, the way these things are written, the characters, the depth. Basically what Nolan does is Nolan proves that the summer popcorn blockbuster does not have to be schlock. He proves that you don't have to settle for Transformers 27, The Dark Side of the Last Night. You don't have to settle for that kind of filmmaking. You can actually go and have an intelligent and enjoyable and impressive popcorn blockbuster experience. And I think we should really be pinning a lot of our hopes on this guy, because he's one of the very few filmmakers, I think, making films today. There are others, Scorsese, Tarantino, to name a few, who could actually fill a cinema. Now, there's other sort of secondary, perhaps what you might call maybe the more indie type filmmakers, or the filmmakers that are sort of, you know, the art house type filmmakers who could easily attract that set just by having their name attached to a project. But the big blockbuster stuff, there's very few filmmakers who are actually doing that well at the moment. And Christopher Nolan is one of them. As I said, he's a guy who proves that these popcorn blockbuster films don't have to be garbage. And not only do they not have to be garbage, but they can actually, as well as being well-made films, they can have a real depth to them and something that's actually interesting and profoundly important to say about the world and the human experience at the same time. Basically, one of the things I think that's well worth noting about Christopher Nolan is that he only makes a film once every 2 years on average. So once every 2 years he releases a new film, which is, you know, there's a bit of a moral to that story, Disney, wink wink, nudge nudge. He doesn't get formulaic. He's not writing to formula. He's not writing clearly for monetary gain. He's writing and he's creating projects that he loves. There is, apart from the Batman trilogy, there isn't consistency to what he's producing either. There's different types of films and different types of characters and different types of scenarios in the various films that he is putting to the big screen. And I think that, as I said, the moral of the story is he's not trying to create some massive universe, and it's not formulaic. That's really, really key. He's actually giving himself time. That 18 months to 2 years is basically the time you need to think through, to write and to create, and then obviously to put together and edit and everything else a really good piece of cinema. You're not rushing it. You're not working to someone else's monetary calculation. You know, if you add a bit of this and a pinch of that and two of those, then we'll make lots of money. Instead, there's something more creative going into this process, and he's giving himself the space to do that. I think a lot of the big cinemas could really learn from this. Take note. You don't have to be, even if you're making a cinematic universe, why, oh why do you have to be churning out 1 or even 2 movies a year? You don't. The simple thing is you don't. It's purely a money-making calculus. When you get caught in that cycle, then you very easily lose sight of the importance of creativity. There are 3 things that I would like Christopher Nolan to be given. 3 things on my wish list for Christopher Nolan, and they are these, in this order. Number 3, I would like Christopher Nolan to be given his own Star Wars trilogy. I would like him to be given complete creative control. I want Disney to go to Christopher Nolan and I want them to say to him, look, good sir, please come and make the trilogy that we so desperately need you to make for our franchise. You have total creative control. You can hire the writers that you want. We want you, hopefully you'll agree to this, to direct all 3 of the films, but you can write and work with a team of writers, whoever you want to. Perhaps your brother Jonathan Nolan, he might be interested in joining you. But we want you to have total creative control. We will bankroll whatever you want to do. Now, he can't be given just 1 film in a trilogy. If that happened, what you would see is 1 really good film and 2 average films probably either side of it, or even 2 other films that, unless he was surrounded by really good filmmakers and they all collaborated together on the story for the trilogy, which didn't happen this time. Not looking at anyone, JJ, but it didn't happen this time, right? And it should have. But unless they collaborated, unless he was working with really top-tier directors, then the chances are what you would have in a trilogy like that was the Christopher Nolan film would just stand out and would be this phenomenal entry into a trilogy where the other 2 films would be sort of, yeah, just okay. So you'd want him to have total control of his whole trilogy. The second thing I would like Christopher Nolan to be given is I would like Christopher Nolan to actually be given the creative freedom, the green light to make either a medieval or swords and sandals epic. I want to see what he could do with that genre. Remember Gladiator? Well, you go back and watch Gladiator now, and it's still a good film, but you realize that it is dated a little bit. I think Christopher Nolan has the potential to actually make a swords and sandals epic or a medieval period film, an epic film from a different historical period that is actually probably a genre beater. It's going to be something that's going to be even better than Gladiator. So I'd love to see him given that opportunity. And number 1 on my list, this is the first and most important thing I would like to see, is I want Christopher Nolan to be given his own James Bond film. I want him to make a new James Bond movie. I want him to have total creative control again. And if I had my way, my preference would be that Daniel Craig would still be the James Bond that he was working with. Can you imagine a James Bond film that was written and directed by Christopher Nolan? In fact, when you think about it, if you think about a film like The Dark Knight, in many ways The Dark Knight is very much a James Bond-esque crime spy type thriller. It really has that sort of feel to it. This is what made it such a sort of genre bending type film, was that, and showed the excellence that you could go to in comic book movies, was it took these 2 iconic comic book characters, you know, Batman and his villainous enemy, the Joker, and it created this film that was really something else altogether. It was really something much better than just a comic book movie. And so you could easily see him taking that same sort of level of skill and that same type of approach to produce an excellent James Bond film. In many ways, the Joker in The Dark Knight really is a Bond-type villain. So you can just imagine what Christopher Nolan would do if he had the freedom to do those things. In fact, I think this is why he'd be so good with perhaps a Star Wars type film or some sort of big historical sweeping epic or swords and sandals type epic, is because he understands the importance of writing these sort of interesting characters and concepts and having these big sort of sweeping cinematic concepts that really draw you into a film. Even the films that perhaps in recent years haven't always gone over as well with audiences, I think in time they will come to be loved a lot more. So I know some people didn't really understand Interstellar and freaked out a bit and thought that the whole message he was trying to promote there was that love will save the world. But it was actually much deeper than that. The big theme in Interstellar is really this question of what is it that's worth fighting for in humanity, and is technology and sort of scientific knowledge the ultimate pinnacle of what it is we should be striving for as human beings, or should that scientific knowledge and that technology be actually governed and made subservient to something else, so some deeper and more profound and more important truths about the human person, about family, about love and self-giving and self-sacrifice and things like that. And I think in time people will really come to see that film in a even those who perhaps who were a little bit skeptical about it will come to realize that it was actually really a masterpiece of filmmaking. So even a film like that, which some people didn't like, compared to say something like The Dark Knight, which just about everyone loved, is still just like a billion times better than the rest of the stuff that's being churned out of Hollywood at the moment. So there you go. Christopher Nolan, you are our only hope. Please, please, please keep making films. And please, somebody let this man have access to some of these big and important franchises, so we can get this guy who has shown us that he can produce excellence in blockbuster filmmaking, coupled up with some of these classic blockbuster franchises, to give us something really that's truly quite amazing. As per usual, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And if you like the content I'm producing and you want to see more of it, then please support me on Patreon. A huge thank you to all of my existing Patreon supporters. I haven't got a huge group there so far, but those who are there, those faithful few, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate the support that you're showing me, the fact that you're in my corner. If you want to support me on Patreon, there is a link in the description below, and there's a link on screen now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.